In the bustling heart of Quezon City, hidden between rusted rooftops and the noisy hum of jeepneys, lived a poor mechanic named Cemon Cowell. His hands were rough, his clothes worn, but his spirit unyielding. Every morning before sunrise, Cemon pushed his small wooden cart filled with tools through the narrow alleyways, fixing broken tricycles and patching up old tires just to earn enough for a bowl of rice and dried fish. Life had never been kind to him, but he had learned to survive through quiet endurance. He was known as a man of few words, humble, polite, and endlessly hardworking. Yet behind those tired eyes was a silent dream, to give his mother a better life and escape the endless loop of poverty. One gloomy evening, the rain poured endlessly over the tin roofs, turning the streets into muddy rivers. Cemon was about to close his tiny shop when two policemen arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They called his name sharply, and before he could understand why, he was handcuffed in front of his neighbors. Whispers spread faster than the rain. "Cemon killed the store owner," someone shouted. Shock and fear filled his chest. The local Sari store owner, Mang Rodel, had been found dead behind his shop, and all evidence seemed to point toward Cemon. The same wrench he used for work had been found at the crime scene, covered in blood. Inside the dim police station, Cemon's trembling voice tried to explain that he was repairing a jeepney in another barangay at the time, but no one believed a poor man's words against the evidence. He sat in the cold cell, his hands shaking, his mind spinning between disbelief and despair. The city lights outside blurred through the metal bars, mocking him like distant stars he could never reach. "Why me?" he whispered to himself. The officer in charge smirked and said, "Because you were the easiest to blame." That night, Cemon's name became the talk of the city. News reports described him as a killer mechanic, and people who once greeted him turned their backs in disgust. His mother cried silently at home, clutching the old rosary he gave her. Poverty had already stripped them of everything. Now, it was stealing their dignity too. What hurt most wasn't the handcuffs or the accusations, but the disbelief in his neighbor's eyes. For a man who had lived honestly all his life, being seen as a monster felt worse than death itself. But what no one knew was that this was only the beginning of one of the most insane twists ever to unfold in Philippine crime history, a story that would shock the country, challenge justice itself, and prove that even the poorest soul can be caught in a storm far beyond imagination. Days turned into weeks, and Cemon Cowell's life felt like a living nightmare. The news had painted him as a cold-blooded killer, and the people who once trusted him now crossed the street to avoid his gaze. Inside the narrow walls of his cell, time moved painfully slow. He could hear the rain tapping on the roof like a cruel reminder that the world outside was still moving while his life stood still. Then, just when things couldn't seem worse, a shocking piece of evidence appeared, a recording of his voice confessing to the crime. The police played it before the media, and the entire city of Manila was convinced. The tape was clear, his words unmistakable. "I did it," the voice said. "I killed Mang Rodel." But Cemon knew one thing with absolute certainty: it wasn't his voice. His heart pounded as he tried to make sense of it. How could a poor man like him be trapped in something this sinister? He didn't have the money for lawyers, nor the influence to fight back. Yet, in a twist straight out of a movie, a young journalist named Laura Dizon began investigating his case for a small online news outlet. She saw something in Cemon's eyes that told her he wasn't lying. Her instincts screamed that something deeper was hiding behind this so-called confession. With only her camera and a notebook, Laura started digging through the cracks in the investigation. After weeks of sleepless nights and dead ends, Laura uncovered something mind-blowing. The confession tape was a deepfake. Someone had used artificial intelligence to copy Cemon's voice and fabricate a confession that sounded real. The twist didn't just clear his name, it revealed a disturbing truth about the people behind the setup. The culprit wasn't a stranger, but Cemon's own childhood friend, Joel Ramos, a man he had once helped when no one else would. Joel, driven by jealousy and debt, had worked with a corrupt police officer to frame Cemon and collect a secret reward offered for the killer's capture. When Lara exposed the story online, it spread like wildfire across the Philippines. Social media erupted in outrage, calling it one of the most insane and heartbreaking cases of false accusation in modern history. People who had once called Cemon a murderer were now flooding his mother's house with apologies and donations. Reporters camped outside the police station, demanding answers. The Manila Police Department scrambled to control the damage as their reputation crumbled. Inside his cell, Cemon wept, not from relief, but from the weight of betrayal. The pain of being betrayed by someone he once called brother cut deeper than any wound. He realized that in a world where technology could fake a man's voice, truth itself had become fragile. Still, Lara's courage reignited a spark of hope in him. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that justice might actually find him, no matter how poor or powerless he was. The day finally came when Cemon Cowell stood before the Supreme Court of the Philippines. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, and even strangers who had followed his story filled every seat. The air was thick with tension, yet for the first time in months, Cemon felt a small spark of hope burning in his chest. His clothes hung loosely from his thin frame, his face pale from sleepless nights, but his eyes, those same tired eyes that once looked defeated, now carried something fierce. Across the room sat Joel Ramos, the man who had betrayed him, handcuffed and pale with fear. The court clerk read out the verdict, and when the words "not guilty" echoed through the hall, Cemon's knees gave way. Tears streamed down his face as the crowd erupted in applause. Justice had finally found him. But freedom didn't erase the scars. Outside the courthouse, the world had already moved on, chasing the next scandal. For Cemon, rebuilding his life was harder than surviving prison. His small shop had been vandalized, his tools stolen, and his home burned by those who once called him a friend. Still, he refused to give up. With help from Lara Dizon, the journalist who had believed in him, he began again, repairing bikes under a broken roof, smiling at strangers who now greeted him with respect. When a reporter asked if he forgave those who turned against him, he simply said, "I forgive, but I will never forget." Pain is a teacher that never sleeps. Soon, his story went viral. News channels across the United States, Europe, and Asia picked it up, calling it the most insane case twist in Philippine history. International human rights groups invited Cemon to speak about corruption, technology, and the dangers of deepfakes. For a man who once struggled to buy rice, standing on stage before hundreds of people felt surreal. Yet, even in the spotlight, he remained humble. He wore the same faded jacket he'd been arrested in, a reminder of where he came from. When asked what kept him strong, he replied softly, "Truth doesn't need power, it only needs patience." His words touched millions, sparking debates about justice, technology, and the struggles of the poor in modern society. One evening, as the sun set behind Quezon City's skyline, Cemon sat quietly beside his mother's grave. The wind carried the scent of rain, the same scent from the night he was taken away. He closed his eyes and whispered, "We made it, Ma." The truth came home. The city lights reflected in the puddles near his feet, shimmering like tiny stars. Though he had lost nearly everything, his time, his peace, his innocence, he had gained something greater, the unshakable belief that even the poorest man can stand tall when truth is on his side. His story became a living legend in the Philippines, a reminder that no lie lasts forever, and sometimes, the most broken people are the ones who change the world.